couple of you have requested that I do the pan sauce recipe for the for your first practical. And so I'm also shooting my chicken cordon bleu recipe today. So I'm going to do a variation of this. I'm going to do everything except for the parm. I'm going to replace the Parmesan cheese with Dijon mustard. And it's basically the exact same procedure. It just changes it slightly. Okay, so let's get started. So step one is to heat our butter in our pan. And we're going to turn that on a medium heat. You don't want to go too high with this because you can burn your butter. And one thing that I see students do all the time is burn their butter during practicals. I am going to take my pre-minced garlic. If you notice, I have all my mise ready for this entire thing because sauces go really, really quickly. And actually, I'm just going to put it on top of my butter as it melts. The best way to get butter, one of two ways, is either weigh it, because it's always accurate and quick, and you don't have to shove it into a tablespoon or a teaspoon, or we always have the butter underneath the prep table that is already softened, and that is pretty easy to shove in a teaspoon or tablespoon if you need to. So once this melts, I'll see you back here in a minute. Our garlic has now cooked for about 1 minute. I'm going to turn it down to low so I don't burn it. I'm going to add my flour, which is 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon. And I'm going to mix it together and make my roux. And the reason that it wants you to cook it for about 1 minute is because that is going to take the chalkiness out of the flour, which is good because the last thing you would want is your sauce to taste chalky. Okay, see you in a minute. At this point, the butter and flour have cooked for about 1 minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chicken stock here and I'm going to pour all of it in at one time. I'm going to crank this up to high and I'm going to whisk in my roux and I am going to bring it up to a simmer. Now, it is super important that you whisk periodically because what's going to happen is the roux is heavier than the liquid. So right now, it's still in like, it's still kind of like floating in the liquid. But if I was to leave it there, the roux would settle to the bottom of the pot and could possibly coagulate at the bottom of the pot and not in the middle of the liquid. And that's how you would get what most chefs refer to as roux balls, and that is, or lumps in your sauce. So if your family members have ever made lumpy gravy and you don't quite understand why, because they're not particles of meat, it's probably whatever thickener or whatever starch they use that they didn't stir the pot enough. So as soon as this comes up to a simmer, it will have done all of its voodoo that it needs to do, and it will be as thick as it's going to get, and then we can go on to the next step. Our sauce is starting to come up to a simmer. You can see some bubbles starting to break. And so at this point, what we are going to do is we are going to mix in our heavy cream while stirring. I have this adorable little quarter cup measuring device. I'm going to mix that in. I'm going to let it return to a simmer, and then I'm going to shut it off. This is the point that you want to shut it off in the in your practical. Now, you can also add your Parmesan at this point as well, because there's nothing that's going to disturb your Parmesan. I am going to add my Dijon at this point because it's fine. And then the only other thing that we need to add is salt and parsley. And the reason that you don't want to add your parsley right now is because you don't want that to get overcooked and look horrible. So this is returned to a simmer. It does it literally that quick. I'm going to give it a little shot of Dijon. I'm going to stir that in. I'm going to give it a taste. And actually, I'm going to turn the heat off at this point. That's not too bad. I'm going to add a little bit more. Or maybe a lot more. Try it again. That tastes great. I'm going to get a little pinch of salt. I always add salt after I add the Dijon or the Parmesan, because both of them are very heavy in salt. And so I know I always tell you to season as you go. With sauces, it's a little bit different, especially when you're adding salty ingredients. Bacon, Dijon, Parmesan, all of them are very salty. Okay, so we're gonna put, and actually I'm gonna take it off the burner so it doesn't keep cooking. And then basically, when we are ready to plate, so let's pretend that I went off and I did everything else I needed to do. My chicken came out of the oven. Well, now I'm going to bring this back up to a simmer. I'm going to add my parsley, if it doesn't stick to the bottom. I'm going to stir it in, and that's it. And now I'm done. And this is what your sauce should look like. And it should be nappe. So if you use the back of a spoon and you run your finger across, it should hold that line, which it does. It's perfectly thickened. You can see that. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video.